Hi guys, today I'm talking a bit about stylizing eyes. It's honestly one of my favorite things to do. I think it's something that a lot of us like to do. So I want to talk a bit about the actual breakdown on the decisions that I make on why I'm stylizing a certain area of the eye or what exactly I'm doing to make it look the way that I want it to and to make it my own. But I wanted to give a really quick preview of some of the goodies that I'm working on for the citrine package over on Patreon. If you'd like to make sure that you get these in the mail plus other goodies, go ahead and make sure to sign up for the citrine package over on Patreon before the end of April. And I also have other speed paints and sneak peeks of the things that I'm working on Patreon as well. I'll have a link right now in the description that'll take you over there if you want to check that out, but let's go ahead and jump right into the video. So first, just jumping right in, the most important thing to stylizing an eye is to understanding the anatomy of the eye in a more realistic term. So here I'm just doing a little red line on top of an actual photo of an eye. And if you're not really comfortable with how to actually draw an eye or the breakdown of an eye, this is a really great way to get an understanding of the anatomy of it and the different shapes that build up to create an eye. And it's a good way to just get a better roadmap of how you want to go about drawing an eye. So I highly recommend doing this with a lot of different eye shapes and different angles of the eyes as well, because it completely changes how you draw an eye depending on if it's a profile or straight on or a 3/4. So get as much reference as you can and work off of those and study those, because it really does make a lot of difference on how you can stylize them and different features that you can really choose to show. So I like to really focus on different details within the eye and different shapes and decide whether I want to emphasize them more or de-emphasize them. So one of the features is the outer corner of the eye, and that's just where it transitions from the top of the eyelid, from the bottom of the eyelid down into the tear duct. And sometimes if I want the character to have more of an open-eyed or potentially innocent look, I can extend that before it curves around to the tear duct, and then it does open the eye up quite a bit. But also if I want it to have more of a sleek, streamlined look, then I can really de-emphasize that curve so that it's one sleek curve from where the lower eyelash, where that line goes from the top eyelid over to the tear duct on the bottom. And this really does end up changing how much of the iris and the pupil and everything I can show. So if I want to be able to show much more of the iris, I can extend that outer corner so that there's more room to have that and also to have more white of the eye surrounding it. If I want to have a little bit more of a closed off iris, then I can do something that's a little bit more narrow, and then it has a completely different look to the way that the iris is shown. Of course, this can completely vary. If you want to show a really small iris within a more narrowed eye, then that's something that you can achieve a similar look with different tools. And then I can also emphasize or de-emphasize the inner corner of the eye, and that's where the tear duct is, and those are the points that are pointing towards each other. This area is one that I tend to not emphasize nearly as much as the outer corner. I tend to stick to a certain angle when it comes in from the top of the eyelash into the tear duct. But you can really change, again, the shape of the eye with this. And I know I already mentioned this, but it really is important to study different photographs of different eyes, because the more you study those, the more you can see naturally occurring shapes of the eyes, and then you can choose to go different directions with the way that your eye is actually shaped. But this is one area that you can focus on if you want to change the angle of the eye and the way that it's interacting with the eyebrows. There's just so much that it can affect the way that it places within the face that you can really just play with any area of the eye with the shapes, with the line work that you're creating to create a different expression. And it is a really fun thing to just challenge yourself to try different shapes that you haven't before and then see how you like how it comes together in your final piece. And the final one that I'll really go into more detail is just simplifying the shapes. I actually tend to prefer really simplifying eyelashes in the eyes that I draw. A lot of people like to show lots of eyelashes, and actual eyes have lots of eyelashes, but I actually like to have it a little bit more streamlined, and then I like to choose very specific areas where I want to have the eyelashes shown. So that's one area that I personally like to simplify, but that's the fun part about stylizing eyes, is that this is where you can really make it your own and make it your own style. You can actually choose which features are things that you want to include in your piece and what things are stylistically something that you feel like you could not have in your piece. Like the tear duct, I actually really love drawing that into the eye, but that's something that easily could be cut out and then you'd end up having a much more simplified eye. I actually really like putting in a little bit of like a baggy eye line around the bottom of the sphere of the eye to make my characters look just a little bit more tired. That's a detail that is a little bit less simplified that I choose to put in there, and I feel like that kind of line work combined with the more simplified eyelashes, that creates something that feels a little bit more balanced. So it's all kind of a give and take of how simplified you want it and what features are most important to you when you're drawing it. And now I'm just drawing a bunch of different eyes using those different fundamental things that I think about when I'm stylizing eyes. There are, of course, so many different things and features to pay attention to when you want to stylize your eyes and different ways to combine them with other things. But there are a few things also that I like to really pay attention to, like in the red line that I did of that original actual eye shape, you'll notice that the bottom eyelid and the top eyelid of this very particular one is actually pretty symmetrical, pretty evenly curved. And I actually really like to push either the top or the bottom eyelid to be a little bit more straight and then emphasize a curve on the other eyelid. I think that it has a lot more interest to it where it has more play between the two eyelids. So that's one that I didn't actually really talk about in much detail, but is pretty much always in all of my eyes in some way. Either I like to lower the top eyelid so that it becomes more of a straight line, it's a little bit more intense and severe, or I like to raise the bottom eyelid. That can be something that goes along with a smile. And yeah, that's a whole nother topic, but it is also really important to pay attention to the way that eyes change shape depending on the expression that someone is making. So if someone's smiling really big, then that's going to squish up the bottom of the eyes as well. So all of that goes into just understanding the anatomy of the eye so that you can transition it into a more stylized version. And I also noticed that I actually really do prefer beginning the eye on the top of the eyelid. That grounds it out and it helps make sure that it's placed correctly within the face. I know all of these are completely disconnected from the actual head, but when I'm working on an actual face and I want to make sure that the eye looks good in there, I start with the top of the eyelid and then I work down to the bottom of the eyelid, or the bottom eyelid, I should say, and then I can build it up so that it sits well within the face. I also, and this is again something I'm not showing here, but when I'm drawing a face, I actually start sculpting out the entire profile of the head first, and then I put the basic shapes of the eye in. That allows me to make sure that it is proportionate and correct, and it's working within the head space rather than drawing a couple of eyes that don't actually end up working within an actual head. So that's really important. It's great to be able to just sit and draw as many different stylized eyes as you want, but until you can actually apply them to a head, they don't get the same benefits. They don't go as far as when you're actually learning how to stylize an eye within a face. And I just want to show you a little bit of how I like to do a completed, finalized, cleaned up eyeball. And this is basically the exact same process whether I'm doing it digitally or if I'm doing it in watercolors with line work and everything. It's a bit different for oils, but that's a whole different matter. And I also think I'll talk a little bit about the breakdown of what stylistic things I like to do to make it feel like my own eye, and, well, not my own eye, my own stylized eye, and what things I really enjoy putting in there. So, like I mentioned, I like to have really simplified lashes, but I like to have a very thick stroke on the top of the eyelid so that it has a really, almost like a cast shadow feel to it. It feels really heavy and significant, and it draws the eye to that area. And then sometimes I add a few little extra sharp eyelashes on the top to add a little bit of detailing to it. And then I also make sure that you can see the waterline of the bottom eyelid. That way it gives it a little bit more realism to it, and that's where the eyelashes come off, and I can make sure that I get a little bit of a highlight there when I end up coloring it in. It just gives me a place to add a little bit more detail to the eye. And finally, my favorite thing to stylize with the eye is actually the pupil. You can do so much with it, and it can completely change how a character looks. I oftentimes like to leave it off. I think that it helps it look a little bit more haunted and ghostly, but if I also portray it differently, it can also look a little bit more open and childlike. And I also really like to have a very sharp, angular pupil, like a cat almost, and that gives it a little bit more of a sharp, lethal look to it. And this, I'm playing with a completely different shape, an X shape, And I made sure that the ends had a little bit more of this organic breaking off so that it almost looked like it could be a naturally occurring iris pupil shape. But yeah, this is one that you can just really play with it. I've done a lot of different things in a lot of my different pieces that have been so much fun to see how it changes the character and how it looks ultimately. I mean, at the end of the day, the eyes are the thing that as a viewer we look at first and we respond to and we connect with, and when we see the character's eyes, they become a character, they become real in a sense. So that's really a fun finalizing thing, to make sure that the iris is the shape for what I want that character to look and feel like, and the emotion that I want to be portrayed in that piece. And that is it for this little mini eye tutorial. I would love to hear from you guys. What are some of the things that you make sure to draw when you're drawing your eyes and you want them to be stylized, that look like your own style? Yeah, I would be interested in that. But I also have a link down in the description that will take you over to my art shop if you'd like to buy any prints or originals. I also have a link to my Patreon, which is a great way to help support me and this channel and all the artwork that I do. There are some behind the scenes goodies that you'll find over there and packages that are put together and sent just to you guys. But that is it. So I will be back next week with some more videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you then.